Yes, indeed. We certainly thank the Chappaqua Library. We've been doing this program for 26 years. They have been our host and our supporter, and we thank them. Also joining me today is the rest of our team, Amy Friedman, Naomi Marrow, Karen Resnick, and Tyler Beebe. So anyway, we have a great team that works very hard to bring you top-notch speakers. And as we were talking, there are minuses and pluses of Zoom. Today, we are definitely in a plus. What it has also allowed us to do is not just cover when we can't get anywhere and we're snowed in, but also we can bring in speakers. Our last session came from Tashkent, Uzbekistan. Today, we're speaking with our speaker from Washington, D.C., McLean in particular. And so it's been really very interesting. Today also is snow day for Pace University. So Amy's Pace students are also logging in by Zoom. So they don't get a real snow day. Amy still expects them to be in class, though over Zoom. So anyway, welcome to both everyone, Nicole and our Pace students. So this year is the 250th anniversary of the founding of the United States, which has been since then the beacon of democracy, equity, freedom, justice, and the world has looked to us for those features. Yet around the world, and even in the US, these values are under increasing assault. So the Trump doctrine of America First was interpreted by supporters as turning inward and focusing domestically on jobs, economy, affordability. And yet he increasingly seems to be turning to the world stage and exerting influence and control through use of tariffs, military might, in place of diplomacy and alliances. Further, when the US previously had intervened in giving aid or military intervention, the values of democracy, human rights, and so on were held out as ideals. That rhetoric seems to be missing now from the Trump administration, and its place now in supporting leadership, autocratic or not, is one that is compliant more to the will of the Trump administration. So as we try to make sense of a world that seems to be rebalancing its priorities and values, we look with great interest to our speaker, Nicole Bibbins Sedaca, to discuss U.S. foreign policy and diplomacy. So before I turn the program over to Amy Friedman to introduce our speaker, let me do just a quick housekeeping. Our speaker will speak for about 30-35 minutes. We will then continue with questions from our panelists and from you, our viewers, and end around 11:15. Please enter questions in the chat tab at the bottom of your screen. Our program is being recorded and will be archived for on-demand viewing on the Chappaqua Library website. I hope you've had a chance to look at the reading that was included with the registration, but it will also be included in the chat. And so now let me turn the program over to Amy Friedman.
Great. Thank you, June. And thank you to the library for setting this up. And I'm glad that my students could join us on this Zoom day. We're delighted to welcome Nicole Bibbins Sedaca. She is the Kelly and David File Fellow at the George W. Bush Institute, where she focuses on American foreign policy, U.S. and global democracy, and questions of freedom, human rights, and leadership. She has extensive written work relating to democracy and human rights. Her writing appears in the Journal for Democracy, CNN, Foreign Policy Magazine, The Hill, and many others. She has also been interviewed or done talks on NPR, the Council on Foreign Relations, and many local and national news outlets. Bibbins Sedaca served as the executive vice president and interim president at Freedom House, an organization dedicated to defending and expanding freedom worldwide by promoting accountable government, rule of law, civil liberties, and political rights. Previously, she was a professor in the practice of international affairs at Georgetown University's Master of Science in Foreign Service program and served as the deputy director and chair for the Global Politics and Security concentration at the Foreign Service program. Bibbins Sedaca has held numerous positions in the public and non-governmental sectors in the United States and in Ecuador, including serving for 10 years in the United States Department of State, working on democracy promotion, human rights, human trafficking, religious freedom, refugees, and counterterrorism. She holds a master's degree from Georgetown University School of Foreign Service and a bachelor's in international relations from the College of William and Mary, where she was a presidential and Monroe Scholar. She also studied at Humboldt University in Berlin, Germany. We are so pleased, Nicole, to welcome you, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Amy, and thank you to everybody at PACE and Chappaqua. It's really wonderful to be with each of you. As a former professor who taught through COVID, I know what it's like to pivot to online, and I know what it's like for students to not escape and have a snow day when you expect that snow will give you a break. So it's just really wonderful to be with everybody. And as a person who works at the Bush Institute, where reading and the importance of libraries is talked about on a regular basis, it's just really wonderful to see a library and a university partnering to foster all of the conversations that you all are fostering, and really thankful for that. I am going to pull up my slides if I can do that. And then jump into our conversation. And I really do hope it is a conversation. I really look forward to questions and comments and agreements and disagreements about where we are globally and what lies ahead. So I'm just going to see, can everyone see my screen? Hopefully, yes. I'm going to assume so, and somebody will yell if you can't.
Yes.
Wonderful. All right, so here's what I want us to walk through in my time where I'm sharing. And again, I will share thoughts for a bit, and then we'll open it up to questions from the audience, and really, truly an exchange. I want to just talk about where we are. What's the state of global freedom? Like, what does it look like when we're looking around the world? How are things looking? How did we get here? How did we get to the point where we are on the state we are in the world? Does it matter how free people are around the world? Like, what does it matter? I'm sitting in Washington, D.C. Many of you are sitting all over the world or all over the country, in New York and other places. What does it matter? Thinking a little bit about our American foreign policy. I also don't want to assume everybody's an American, but U.S. foreign policy specifically. And then what does it look like to be supporting democratization around the world? And then open up for a time of questions. So let me just start with the state of global freedom. When we're talking about global freedom, we're talking about how is it that the 8 billion plus people around the world are experiencing freedom? Are people able to do the things which allow them to live their lives freely? Are they able to speak? Are they able to worship? Are they able to gather with people that they want to? Are they free of their government or other organizations arresting them, detaining them, mistreating them, or anything else which limits their ability to live freely and to just exercise and live their life the way they would like to live? I, as the former interim president and vice president of Freedom House, I go always to Freedom House's maps. This is the map of a report that Freedom House puts out every year called Freedom in the World. What it does is it ranks every single country in the world on how people are experiencing freedom in their local context, how they are experiencing freedom based on 25 separate indicators. And they rank each country on how people are experiencing those 25 indicators from 0 to 4. So you get up to a scale of 100, and you will have countries ranked from 0 to 100. The countries in green are those that are ranked free. Those are the countries that largely people are experiencing many of those freedoms, not perfectly, not without challenge, not without exception, but they are largely able to express themselves. They're able to worship freely. They're able to take part in their government in the sense that they can form political parties or participate in elections or participate in civic life and mobilizing. They're able to have free conversations like this. The countries in yellow are what are called partly free. They're not completely closed societies, but they are societies where people are experiencing in some of those 25 areas some sort of significant limitation in their ability to express themselves, to live freely, and to practice and experience those freedoms which are universally recognized. Those countries that are purple on this map are those which are considered not free. They are the lowest ranking countries on how people are experiencing freedom. People in those countries are largely experiencing on a daily basis a significant limitation of their rights. They may have them in some areas, but largely across the board, their ability to speak, to participate in civic life, to participate in political life, to assemble how they would want to worship, to speak, are significantly limited. Press freedom is significantly limited in many of these countries. And so when we're looking, I don't know if you can hear my dog, but he is joining in our conversation. When we're looking at these countries, what we're seeing really is an increasing number of countries that are purple and an increasing number of people around the world who are not living as freely as they could. And what we recognize is only 20% of the world's population lives in a country that is green, according to this map. That's 1 in 5 people in the world are living in a country which is, by Freedom House standards, ranked as free. There are other organizations that are doing similar rankings that largely align more or less with what Freedom House is also saying. So this is not a unique or an unusual assessment that there's a relatively small percentage of the world's population that's able to live freely. So let me just also then show what this has looked like over time. This is another chart also from Freedom House that shows that this is 19 years of decline. We're now in our 20th year of decline. What we have seen over the last 20 years is a significant decline in the amount of people who are living in a place that is considered free. And what we have seen, and what you'll see, the red and the blue here, is year over year, the blue is the number of countries that have improved, have become freer over time in that 1 year that it was measured, and the red are the countries that over time have declined. So what you've seen is, for the last 20 years, we have seen more countries that are declining in the amount of freedom that they're experiencing than the number of countries that are experiencing more freedom in this time. And that's a concerning trend. It's a very significant trend. If you have more people year over year who are experiencing a restriction or a decline in the freedom that they're experiencing, then more people who are living more openly and freely. So let's unpack, how did we get here? But before I do that, I want to just throw out 3 terms, because inevitably people will hear me go back and forth between terms, and I just want to make sure that we're clear on a few terms that you'll hear me use. Freedom, democracy, and human rights. And in the introduction, you heard all 3 of those terms used, and it's important to think about those. They're all very, very interrelated, but I'll do a little word definition, and then we can talk about how did we get to the place where we are. Freedom really is a state of being. It's a state of being in which each of us can live and live our lives in a way that is authentic to us, and that it is a way that we are able to express who we are. Some of us do that by participating in civic life. Some of us do that by associating with people that we have common interests with. Some of us do that by worshiping or choosing not to worship. Some of us do that by speaking or not speaking. So freedom is that state of being in which each of us can live in a way which is how we would choose to live. Secondly is democracy. Democracy is a governing system, and it is unquestionably and undoubtedly the best governing system that we are aware of today that allows for the best state of freedom. It is not a perfect governing system. We're living in the United States. We know that. We can look at our history, we can look at our current, and we know that it's not a perfect system. But we do know that democracy is the best system of government to allow people to live freely. Human rights are specific entitlements that governments provide to their people. And in a democracy, you are guaranteed a whole list of rights. Those are codified either in a constitution and a bill of rights or in specific laws. It is the rights that are guaranteed to you, that you are entitled to by living in a certain society. Many of the countries that we saw on the map previously are countries, the purple countries, are ones in which those human rights are not guaranteed because they live under a governing system in which those rights are not guaranteed and in which people have no accountability, no judicial process, no street protests, no writing to your congressman, no ability to ask for those rights or to demand them based on a document that provides those entitlements. So I'm happy to take questions or wrestle with those concepts, but I want to just do those as we start to unpack the rest of the conversation. So I showed you a map and a chart and showed that for the last 20 years, the world has become less free, and there are fewer people experiencing freedom in its full capacity, the way we'd like to see people experiencing them, than we did 20 years ago. So how did we get here? There are a number of trends that we've been watching that continue and contribute to this decline, this global decline that we've seen for 20 years. First is truly a rise of autocratic nations, a rise of autocrats and aggressive foreign policies that have contributed to this. These are countries, and when I'm thinking about them, I'm thinking China, I'm thinking Russia, Iran, also a network of countries that have very effectively worked with each other over the last many, many years, but certainly it's a trend that we've seen for a significant number of years, an increased collaboration to be able to both restrict rights and freedoms within their own countries, but also increasingly supporting the limitation of rights in other people's countries. So let me just unpack, what does that mean? You have autocratic nations that are committed not only to like full control and limitations and no challenge of power in their own country, but they're saying we really want to also make sure that we don't have anything outside that is threatening us. So many of these countries that we're seeing, these autocratic governed countries, are ones that support transnational repression. That is where they will send individuals from their government or individuals that they hire to harass, to harass, and in some cases kill or kidnap activists who are outside of their own nation. We recently saw a court case of Masih Alinejad, who is an Iranian activist. She lives in Brooklyn. She has had multiple attempts at kidnapping and murder of her in the United States. So she is a person who's living here. She's living freely. She's enjoying the freedoms that we enjoy in the United States. And the Iranian government has not appreciated the fact that she is a very vocal, very powerful activist who is fighting for the rights of women in Iran, and they have tried to silence her. We see that increasingly. Again, there are countries, China, Russia, Iran, there are quite a few countries which have been very active in transnational repression. We also see a number of these countries trying to interfere in elections in Europe, in the United States, around the world, to really ensure that people come to power who are not going to be a threat or a challenge to their power. So we really have seen a very stark rise in autocrats, both clamping down at home, but also doing it internationally, which has contributed to this decline in democracy and freedom around the world. Many of those autocratic governments have also chosen to support and prop up regimes in other countries who they know are going to be aligned with them, but may not be chosen by the people locally of that country. We're seeing that a lot in Venezuela right now, just the impact of a regime that had been held up very much by the Iranian, Russian, and Chinese governments, but not the government that was chosen by the people of Venezuela itself. we've had a lot of democracies, older, longer term democracies, and I would include the United States in this, that are significantly challenged in these days. They are internally struggling with a variety of issues, populist leaders, extreme parties on the left and the right, individual groups which are more radicalized, misinformation, disinformation. So you have democracies which previously were relatively solid at home, spending also a lot of their time thinking about how do we support democracy outside. Many of those countries have turned inward to say we're going to deal with our internal problems because that's where we need to get things right. And it has detracted from what had been a very robust effort to support democracy around the world. And so you're having these two things happening at the same time. You're also having some democracies who began their democratic journey much more recently than European countries or the United States or Canada. Countries that maybe 30, 40 years ago began their democratization process, many of whom began it during either decolonization or the end of the Soviet Union, have really hit very hard times. Some of them have hit it because of the economic downturn in 2008. Some of them have hit it because populist leaders have been elected and then chosen not to govern democratically. Some of them have just struggled because honestly, early days of democracy are not easy. They're not perfect and they're not linear. And many countries, I think, went into this democratic experiencing, hoping and thinking that it would be something that would take a decade or two, and then things would be a lot easier. And I think that process of deepening democratic roots is just hard. And so many countries have stumbled. So you have the rise of autocrats. You've got longer term democracies that are turning inward and are challenged with their own domestic problems. And you have newer democracies that are saying, was this the right decision? Is this the best way? At a time also that autocrats are really putting a lot of pressure on countries. You also have global organizations, so the United Nations and regional organizations that have been less effective in their work. Almost every single international or regional organization, or the major ones, let me say the major ones, certainly the United Nations, the Organization of American States, the Organization of the African Union, and many other organizations have a strong component about democracy. They are organizations which have said, we will kick you out if you're not a democratic nation. We will kick you out if you have a coup. We will take steps if you are having democratic problems. Many of those organizations in this moment are also floundering and are challenged to exercise the power that they have been given or that they have claimed to actually move the needle on democracy and fighting for rights in many of these countries. And so that has also contributed to this moment that we are in. As we look around the world and we look at a number of the very big problems that we've faced in the last decade or so, COVID pandemic, the Ukraine war, Gaza and Israel, many of the regional and international organizations have not been as effective in addressing those problems as one would hope or expect in a world where we have put a lot of hope and expectation on international and regional organizations to solve the hardest of our problems that cross borders. There have been technology accelerators. Obviously, technology has enabled so much great progress in so many different areas, but it has also enabled and accelerated the bad guys, and it has the behavior of autocratic regimes. So if you think about Russia or China were able to have a certain degree of reach previously. Now, the ability to surveil, to interrupt access to the internet, to have blackouts at a time when all of us are so extraordinarily reliant on the internet, the ability to troll and harass activists, to spread misinformation and disinformation has accelerated exponentially because technology has moved forward. And again, technology is a great thing. It has also connected so many activists and so many people working on democracy around the world, and given hope and given people the ability to do great things. But it has obviously, technology across the board is something which is used by both those that are seeking to damp down freedom and democracy, as well as those that are fighting for it. And then lastly, I would say some of the global trends that we have seen. We've suffered through a pandemic not that long ago. We are seeing migration and urbanization trends, which also put strains on economies. It puts strains on different groups of people living together in ways which they have not always done, which puts strains on social fabric. And we've put a lot of burden on governments to deliver. So you have all of these things that are happening at the same time. They have many, many different impacts, but focusing specifically on the impact that it's had on global freedom and democracy, it has been significant. So let me go to the question, which, who cares? Why does it matter? Does this matter to any of us? Does it matter to any of us, like somebody who's living thousands and thousands of miles away, what freedoms they have, how they live? It will come as no surprise. My answer to that is yes, it does matter. So let me just walk you through why it matters, because I think it's worth asking, right? Because anytime we're thinking about how do we spend as a nation or as an individual or as a university, how do we spend our time? How do we think about these things? We have to say, we can't do all the things. We can't care about all the things. So we have to think what really does matter. I'll go through a number of things, and I'll end up sort of on the moral case, but I will go through what are also the pragmatic cases for American interests as well as the interests of others around the world. Without doubt, having a more democratic world is best for global security and national security. We know that democracies go to war less frequently than autocratic regimes. That does not mean democracies never go to war. That does not mean that the use of force is bad. In fact, I don't think that that is the case, and I think it is a legitimate tool to be used. But if you look at what does it take to go to war, what does it take most often where a country engages in aggressive attacks on their neighbors, and I'm looking here at Russia or other ones, when the domestic population has a say in its foreign policy, a nation will be less likely to go to war because they are accountable to its people. If you're not accountable to your people and you can do whatever you want, then of course you are going to take whatever steps you feel is needed. And that's what we see more from autocratic governments. So where you have transparent and accountable governments, it is a check on the use of force that is too expansive in efforts. There is a democratic peace theory. I'm assuming some of the students have had to study that, gotten to study that, but it is the idea that democracies are less likely to go to war with each other. Part of that is the transparent and accountable nature of democratic governments. Another piece is democracies by nature believe in the rule of law. And we have had a global rule of law without the same enforcement mechanisms, but we have a global rule of law, which has, for the last 80 years, established the norms about how do we deal with each other. And so for governments that are used to following the rule of law at home and adhering to behaviors and norms that restrict behavior, that transfers most often into our foreign policy. If we look at where the greatest security threats are coming right now in the international community, China, Russia, North Korea, it is not coincidental that many of them come from autocratically governed states. If we also look at the threats that come from non-state terrorist organizations, those are quite often supported also by autocratic regimes. Narco-trafficking networks, Hezbollah, Hamas, many organizations that we've seen, the Wagner Group that's supported actively by the Russian government is wreaking havoc throughout Africa. So there's a very strong security case to be made as to why democracy matters. Secondly, economic growth. We have seen consistently over the long term that countries with democratic governments have stronger economic growth over time. There is higher GDP in democracies. And part of that is also when you have an economy or an economic system that is, once again, accountable to its citizens, you are more likely to have a system which is investing in the people and investing in the growth, which will be sustainable over time, as opposed to one which is kleptocratic and which draws resources away from that which the people want in a country. I in no way will say that democracies are completely free of any economic problems, but if we are looking globally and we are comparing the rate of kleptocracy and corruption that exists in autocratic regimes and the ability of the economic system to respond to the people's needs in an autocracy versus a democracy, there is no doubt a democracy performs better every time. There is the human rights case. For those of us who care, when we read about or we see pictures or photographs or reels of people denied of their very real fundamental human rights, there is zero doubt that the comparison between the protection of human rights in a democracy versus an autocracy, it is by and far and away a protection of democracy. Many people will say, well, it's not our concern whether people super far away have human rights or not, or languishing in a prison, or able to worship, or able to speak it up. Many people, though, in the world, and I think it has been a tradition in the United States and part of our social fabric, that we do care, that we do want a world in which other people are enjoying the same freedoms that we enjoy, and that we do care when we see people in the streets in Iran desperately asking to have the right to vote, the right to be able to wear the clothes that they want to wear, to be able to worship and to be able to express themselves, that is something in our moral fiber, because we fought very hard in our own country for that we see around the world. We see mass atrocities and major problems like famines, like mass atrocities and genocides happening in countries which have autocratically governed leaders. And then lastly, development, social development, economic development, is most robust in democracies versus autocracies. So if we care about health development, if we care about economic development and social development, those countries in which the government is responsive to the needs of the people is very, very different than those where the government is simply saying we're going to pursue an agenda, which is the agenda set by us and only us. So let's think a little bit about U.S. foreign policy. Just keeping my eye on the time also, and we'll wrap up in just a few minutes. The United States has a historic connection to U.S. foreign policy based in democratic principles. Since the Reagan administration, and arguably the Carter administration as well, which had a very strong human rights focus, but the Reagan administration, democracy has been part of American foreign policy in different ways, in different approaches, but it really has been a bipartisan focus and a bipartisan accepted part of our foreign policy, that our foreign policy should be anchored in the same values and same principles that we chose at home, and that we should, in what we do outside of our country, support democracy and freedom, both for the moral points, but also for the pragmatic points that it is about American security and American economic growth and global security and growth. It's been part of American culture and our history, certainly, and really coming out of the Second World War and then the Cold War, it was central to the narrative of what those battles were about. The United States was central to founding the United Nations, which in very many ways parallels a democratic form of government in many ways. I will say, obviously, we've had varied approaches from Carter and Reagan through our current administration, and every administration has viewed it very differently and reflected on different priorities. And I think that is the nature of a democratic government. You're going to have swings back and forth of different issues. There have been at times tensions between, do you focus on democracy, do you focus on human rights? And that has been an ongoing debate in the American foreign policy world. Democratic focusing on democracy is much more of a structural issue. It's about the political side of what is the democratic governing system, and the human rights are about individuals. They're about individual people, and can we fight for the rights of individual people? We can discuss that and unpack that further if people want. And I'll just add also, just in thinking about the history of American foreign policy, American democracy support has often been globally received and globally there have been a lot of global perspectives on it, but we have seen a consistent support for American engagement in the world and American support for democracy and human rights around the world. There have undoubtedly been significant points in American history and specific policies that have both been highly problematic, without a doubt, and have had significant pushback globally and domestically. And we have also seen around the world activists and leaders that have looked to the United States for its leadership and for its role in supporting democracy and human rights around the world. Let me just say a word about what it means to support democracy around the world, and then we can open it up to questions. There's the role of nations, the role of individual governments. Every government is going around the world doing its foreign policy. It has a choice in how it does its foreign policy. It can do it anchored in democratic principles, or it can do it without democratic principles. But there is no valueless foreign policy that exists. You are either, when you're engaging in with a government that is autocratic or democratic, you are making choices about how you engage and what you engage on, how you give voice to people of a nation versus how you give it to the government, whether it's elected or not. And so you've got a foreign policy of every nation, which is part of supporting global democracy or not at any given time. There are international organizations. I do believe that they are losing space in our current moment of their efficacy, and part of that is because they have not been as strong as many had hoped in doing this. But we do still have a robust international and regional organization process that is supporting democratization. If you look at what the United Nations is doing, if you look at the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, what the EU is doing, what the OAS is doing, these are all organizations that are actively engaged in supporting democracy around the world. And the degree to which they will do that will also contribute to the trends in democracy. A big piece right now is our global narrative. Our global narrative is shaped by many, many different places, but it really is about how are we understanding the importance of this issue. I think universities, I think our media, I think our foreign policy establishment, broadly defined, and international organizations all play a role in how we talk about and understand democracy in the world. And to the extent that that is something which all of those different entities are putting forward as an important piece of global security, of global values, and of global prosperity, democracy will continue to thrive. If we see that it is a recession in the global narrative from the importance of democracy, that will contribute to the trends that we're seeing. Lastly, there are a lot of nonprofit organizations that are around the world working to support democracy. Freedom House was one of the ones that's where I used to work, is certainly one that is actively in that, the National Endowment for Democracy. There are many nonprofit organizations that are actively supporting other people in other countries that are choosing to fight for democracy and freedom in their country. And it is a robust and vibrant way to support democracy around the world. So I have thrown a ton at you and happy to unpack any or all of it. I do really hope that people are leaving with an understanding of sort of where we are, how we got here, what the challenges are going forward, but also really thinking we have an opportunity to always shape where we are going. And it is really a question of how will we, the global we, use both our economic, our political, our military, and our other resources to stand for these issues or not. And each decision that we make in that space will contribute to the direction that this develops. So with that, I will take down my slides and open up to conversation.
Great. Thank you, Nicole. That was fantastic. Really, you've taken my 14-week course and you have wrapped it into a 30-minute presentation. So thank you. That's really great.
You bet.
So just for everybody here today, feel free to put questions in the chat, and I don't mind being the one to oversee the chat. I'm happy to kick off the questions. Tyler, did you have something? Yeah, why don't I start with Tyler and then I can go after that.
Okay, thank you, Nicole, for a very interesting review of a key subject. My question is, under the Trump administration, obviously we've done very little to encourage the spread of democracy around the world. And in fact, we act like, if you take the Trump administration's outward evidence that they've revealed, that we have no interest in promoting democracy particularly. My question really is better phrased. Do you think there's any permanent damage that this administration has done, to the extent you would want to talk about it, to the role of promoting democracy around the world? In other words, hopefully in 2028, we can reverse the process and perhaps get back to our old tendency to tilt towards democracy around the globe.
I'm going to start with the first part of your question, then I'll get to the second part.
Yeah.
I think this administration has taken a different tact on the role that democracy plays, unquestionably. I think much of, for example, the funding that was to democracy organizations has been cut. I think it has not been a central core point of what the administration has stated is the purpose. And I actually think in some ways it's very interesting. If you listen to, for example, what Secretary Rubio said in his latest testimony about Venezuela, he said very specifically, we want a Venezuela that is stable. I'm going to try and remember this: stable, prosperous, and democratic. I think friendly as well. Stable, friendly, democratic. And so it's listed. I think Marco Rubio, for example, who served on the board of the International Republican Institute, where I used to work, which is one of the leading democracy organizations, understands the very foundational importance of democracy to stability, most certainly in this hemisphere. And I think that you're seeing in these places that when engaging, there is a realization of like, oh, well, we actually have to think about these things. So I think that that is coming into the administration's calculation, and we will see how that unfolds. I don't think anything in foreign policy is permanent, ever. I don't want to say ever. Maybe I need to think about whether that, but I really think leadership is possible at any time. And the reason I think about that is I often reflect back on what it took in 1945 and 1948 to create a world order coming out of two massive world wars, chaos, and the fact that there had never, ever been an international order in which we said we're going to tie things together. But people chose, leaders came together, they exhibited leadership, and they anchored it in democratic values, and they made choices, which tells me there's not an inevitability of anything if the right leaders come to take strong leadership. But that's what we need. We need leaders who are going to say, this is exactly where I need us to go. I think we're now at a point where there's been significant shift, right, of what we've seen over the last year. A significant rupture in many ways, also of the status quo. Where I'm pointing my eyes right now is what will come next. And that is a choice that all of us have, right? Because if we are significantly changing U.S. Foreign assistance, if we're significantly changing, for example, what the EU looks like or transatlantic relations look like, we have to then say, okay, if we're putting those things, if things are going to change, what comes next? And I think this is actually an opportunity for us to think, what are the values and the structures and the relationships that are going to bring us forward into this next generation, which we're at this point are going to have to. So I think that there's nothing irreversible. What I think is the question that we all have to grapple with is, what do we want this next 50 years or 250 years to look like?
Can I ask, and I think
Yeah.
in my mind, this is closely related to what Tyler is asking. It feels in the last year under the Trump administration that there has been a significant shift in norms, right? The norms of US behavior. So of the things that you were listing about foreign policy, this idea about global narratives mattering, it feels to me as if US behavior, not that we never did these things before, we did, but taking out Maduro, striking, unilateral strikes on Iran, a national security strategy that seems to give the impression that we don't care very much about what Russia does in its neighborhood. Maybe we're not going to care what China does in its neighborhood. Do you see this as a signal that there is a dramatic shift in American norms?
I think there's a dramatic shift in a way this administration is approaching foreign policy and the role that democracy plays in it. I do not think it's a shift in the way the American people or Congress believes. That's a really important piece, because the administration, all administrations are elected by the American people, and that is important. And that is we give the power to run the foreign policy. And there are many, many other parts of American society, right? Congress actually is the one that provides oversight. I'm writing a paper right now on the separation of powers. Congress provides oversight. Congress has a tremendous amount of influence in appropriating funds, in holding accountable all of the cabinet secretaries and the president. And in my conversations with people in Congress, there are many who I would say would have given this exact same presentation and are very, very committed to an American foreign policy that's deeply, actively supported. We have a whole philanthropic community, which has a choice as to how do they use their resources. We have a whole nonprofit organization infrastructure. It did take a pretty big hit, but it is still there. The American people have a choice whether they fund those organizations. Our universities. I was a professor for 10 years. What are we choosing also to teach our students about what are the moral anchors of our foreign policy? And I don't say that I say that because all of our students, and I've been in the classroom in and off for the last 20 years, our students are not going to be focused on foreign policy for the next 3 years. They're going to be focused on it for the next 33 or 53 years. And so what we're investing in them today are those frameworks which will govern how they will lead in 20 years or 30 years or 40 years. I'm telling you, students, that's your job in 20 or 30 years. So I'm thinking, I've got 2 teenagers at home, one in college and one who's about to go off to college. I'm just thinking now you're investing, like what they're learning now is what will anchor them when they are the assistant secretary for whatever, or the national security advisor. And so I think that's an important role that all of us play, even if we say this is the foreign policy we love or not. I think we also have to take each of these foreign policy decisions also individually and look at how do we steer them. For example, we're vocal about what's next in Venezuela. Venezuela is at a really crucial pivot point, and the United States can either stand to support the continuation, basically, of the Maduro regime by having his vice president continue to govern, or we can push that the democratically elected opposition that got 70% of the vote is restored, I don't want to say restored, but put in the legitimate power, or there's an election put on the books. Those are things which we as the American people, that Congress, that think tanks, that others, that the media, that universities can all be pushing for. That's the normal part of the process. And so I think we have to look for those opportunities as we go forward, because those are going to be really crucial things in real time to shift the direction of how the United States uses its power.
Great. There are a couple questions in the chat, so let me take one of them and then we'll go to questions from the panelists. So there's a question more about internal domestic issues in the US. And thinking back to the work that Freedom House does, the question is, what would have to change in the United States for us to go from being green, right, from being free to being partly free to being yellow?
Yes.
What are you looking for where the US is going to get dinged and possibly slip into the other category?
Great question. I should have the number right off the top of my head. I want to say the United States is at an 83, but I need to go back and look. I should know that.
That sounds about right. Yeah.
Is at an 83 out of 100. I believe the threshold is a 70, right? So the United States is sort of 13 points away from moving from a green country to a yellow. And obviously I will say the world is complicated, and to put them into 3 color baskets, you flatten a lot of the nuance, right? But what I would say is I would encourage students to also do this. Look at the indicators. Look at all 25 indicators. Where is the United States at a 4? Where is the United States at a 3? A new report will come out on March 19th. So we'll see what happened. Like, how did Freedom House assess it for 2025? But it will be interesting just to see what are those areas. I mean, the things that I'm watching, polarization has been huge in the United States. Are there restrictions on personal security? Are there restrictions on elections, on people's ability to go freely to the elections? Are there restrictions on people's movement? There are lots of these different things, but to drop 13 points, you're going to have to drop in a lot of areas. The United States is not going to zero out in anything, in my view, like, right? I think that's highly unlikely that it zeroes out in any of those 25 categories, but I think there's plenty of them which we can all be looking at and saying, they're at a 4 there, that could drop, or they're at a 3, could that drop?
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think the run up between now and next fall for the midterms is really where the biggest question marks are, and where people are concerned. Yeah.
Yes.
For sure.
Yes.
Naomi, did you have your hand up? You're muted.
Hi there. Nicole, you're wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
What nations are close enough to moving to yellow or green that you would put your support behind if you were in charge?
Yeah. Are you saying moving from green down to yellow, or yellow up to green?
Oh yeah, green to red. No, the other way. More democratic.
Yeah. Which countries are yellow that I would put moving up to green? That is a great question.
And likely successfully, where are the legitimate opportunities that could take hold and stay?
Yeah. One country that has moved back and forth, and I can't remember off the top of my head right now whether they have moved color or whether they have just moved up and down as a country that I lived in, which is Ecuador. I think there are quite a few countries that are probably not making the global conversation every single day the way China and India and others are, but present a really great opportunity to invest in a very robust, strong civil society in a country that has infrastructure that at times has come under pressure from autocratic leaders, but has also been supported by some democratic leaders. I think we have quite a few countries that fall into that basket of right on the edge of just needing significant external support for what is a country that is on the right track and has a lot of great prospects. So that would be one that I would point to. Other examples, let me just think through, and might pull up the list of yellows right now just to see if there's other ones that I see as an immediate opportunity. I'll say this, around the world, it doesn't make the news because we can't consume all the things in all the places in 193 countries. There are so many great activists and courageous leaders in so many countries making decisions which are far more courageous than I will do in the entirety of my lifetime, against a lot of really hard odds that are worth commending. They're not countries which tend to make the top 25 list of foreign policy priorities of the United States or most countries. But there is a lot of great stuff going on around the world that we have to commend. I do think that there are situations, and I would put Venezuela in this, where you have a very, very robust civil society. You have a very, very savvy media class. You have democratic opposition that's organized, that has already won an election. It's almost like the dream team of a country that can be restored to democracy because they were a democracy. You have a lot of very positive things in a country like Venezuela that are high potential, but not given the access right now. I would say that is where I would want to put a lot of pressure and a lot of hope, because if Venezuela, which has all of these things, a great civil society, a very educated population, a democratic opposition, and Maria Corina Machado, that are just phenomenal people, it's got what it needs. It needs the support to move towards democracy. If Venezuela becomes democratic or moves step by step in that direction, it will have massive reverberations in the continent. And I think that's where I would say, if anyone wants to put effort or thought or pressure, that is where I would, and reminding Congress that we need to use our resources and rhetoric for that.
So I don't follow it closely, but there are elections in Hungary in April.
Yes.
Any chance that Orban is going to lose?
I don't want to predict elections publicly. I mean, look, Orban has done what many dictators successfully do, which is to systematically go after different parts of a country's infrastructure, civic infrastructure. He is leading the democratic playbook. He has gone after universities. He has gone after law firms. He has gone after the media. He has gone after those institutions which are outside of government that can pressure him. He has put his allies into positions. That is the democratic playbook. Where we see that unfolding, we should be very, very concerned. I believe that no country is irreversible, and I also don't think that anything is easy. So I will put my hope and optimism that something can change, but I also know that Viktor Orban has done a lot to dismantle the parts of the country that are his opposition.
I'm going to take another question in the chat, and then June after that. And I think actually this ties nicely with what you're saying. The question in the chat from one of my students focuses particularly on media and whether you think, and thinking about the United States, that misinformation, the rise of social media, the polarization in the media landscape, do you think that's a big factor in the decline or the threats to democracy? How would you tie those things together?
Yes, 100%. If I could bold my words, I would. I think that is the most pivotal piece of what is contributing to the decline of democracy around the world, and certainly the challenges that the United States has faced. And then I should also mention the United States has had an 11-point drop over the last 11 years, I believe it is. I don't know what will come out of this next report. That has spanned multiple administrations, but it has been a decline over time. Our media infrastructure is a significant contribution to the decline in our democracy. It is also something which we have some control, not all of the control over. I'll start with where we have control, and I'll go to the bigger picture. We have control over the information that we consume. I personally can spend many hours doom scrolling and being very righteous about my indignation about something that happened, and can then sit and seethe and be really angry and then hate people around me because they are bad people, because that's what I have determined in the privacy of my home. That is neither healthy nor accurate. If we want to spend 10 minutes or an hour or 2 hours on anything, then let's actually be in pursuit of rigorous information. So if I want to be outraged, if I want to say the latest tariff decision from the Supreme Court was great or terrible, then if I honestly want to wrestle with that question, I thought it was a great determination personally. If I want to wrestle with that, then I need to actually read what the justices wrote. I then need to read what are the critiques on both sides, and then land on the issue and then shut it down. Most of us are not exercising that discipline on ourselves. And I would say this is particularly important for younger people, because you're shaping all of your most formative thoughts right now. I've been around for a little bit longer than y'all, so I already have many decades of thinking that I can draw back on and can utilize. But if you are 18, 20, 25, you are shaping your foundational thinking right now that will take you for many years to come. If you are consuming bad information or only one type of information, it is shaping your neural pathways in one direction that is not helpful. So that's our own personal responsibility. I think we can also support organizations that are contributing to local media, to libraries, to other places that are fostering great information dissemination. I think we should listen to better sources. I do think there is a need to have a significant reform and I'm not usually one to say that there should be intervention or regulation, but I do think we have treated social media and some of the information as just a commercial good, but it is significantly like a utility to some extent. And it is significantly like a social good that is contributing to our shared social fabric. And in that sense, I do think that there has to be some sort of tighter controls that look at the contribution of social media to steering us in different directions. The fact that most of us now are not in regular conversations with someone with whom we disagree somewhat is absolutely toxic to a democracy. Because what we are now thinking, I gave this example the other day. When I was a kid, if someone did not believe in slavery or did not believe in the Holocaust, you were like, oh, okay, that's the basket of, I'm not going to talk about that. But basically, you talked about everything else. You agreed with this, you didn't agree with that, you liked this, you didn't. But now we are pushing all of our issues in there. And so if someone says, I have a different view on immigration, if I have a different view on foreign policy, if I have a different view on health policy, it is almost the same moral condemnation that we used to give for someone who denies slavery or denies the Holocaust. We in our country have to have robust conversations and disagree and say, we don't agree on immigration policy. Great. Let me hear a little bit of yours. I like that. I don't like that. That is a normal part. We're losing that. And the minute we lose that and we believe that the people on the other side are not just different, but evil, we are tearing at the most important social fabric of a democracy.
June?
Yes. So going back to your discussion on Orban and how he sort of set up his government to put himself in place. So I think we saw certainly very clearly when Trump came into power, taking steps against universities, taking steps against business and law firms, going after media, all the different things that you were saying. So looking at what happened to Hungary and where we are now, plus the fact that Trump goes after his enemies, he can make it very difficult for people, individuals to speak out. He can go after their companies. How, in fact, do you think we sort of counter that? And I think also when you're talking about media and having conversations, I sort of feel as though you're talking to the believers. So how do we get ourselves out of that position,
Yeah.
rather than just sort of wishing about it?
Yeah. Yeah. So here's where we're very different than Hungary, not better or worse, but we're very different. We have 250 years of history, of democratic history. Now, imperfect, I get it. Lots of imperfections in our 250 years. I'll be the first to tell you all of them. We have very strong limitations on the books for executive power, for executive influence, and for the balance of powers. I don't believe they're all being utilized right now. I don't think we lack for anything as far as legal or oversight or enforcement. I think we are not utilizing all of them. I think we also, one of the most important things I think in this moment is for people on both sides of the aisle, to come together on what are democratic concerns, and democratic meaning little d democratic, because what we quite often are doing in this moment is thinking, if there's something I don't like, the response, if there's something I don't like from the administration, for example, my response is, let's see what the Democrats are doing about it, right? I don't think if it's a Republican Party problem, then an answer would be a Democratic problem solution. If it's a democratic problem, meaning a problem of our democracy, then the response should not be a Democratic Party response. It should be a bipartisan response because it is a democracy problem. That is how we should respond, whether the problem comes during, Obama, Bush, Biden, Trump, or anything. That is a muscle which we have not exercised, which is the muscle to say, when there is a threat to our democracy or there's a problem in our democracy, it should be jointly, left and right, condemned, because our democracy is not a party. It's a shared gift that we have. But the problem is we start to respond in party mechanisms, which is not an effective way to respond to something which is not singularly a party issue. It is about our democracy. And when we exercise that, is when we will strengthen our democracy. I think that we have a significant problem on congressional oversight at this point. And I think if you read Neil Gorsuch's statement related to the tariffs, I think that is it's a classic example. It's not the examples exactly that you gave, but I do think that there's a parallel, which is there are roles and responsibilities we have assigned to different parts of our government, and we have asked Congress, we have not asked. The very first article of our Constitution states that Congress has an extraordinarily important oversight role, and it has been given certain powers, and it also has the power of the purse. And we all know that the power of the purse, I know this as a parent, the power of the purse is one of the most important powers that you can have. If you exercise it well and with integrity, then many of the problems that we're encountering would not exist.
So in a way, we're back at the point where we're waiting for the next election and hoping that we have a system and a populace that understands what is at stake.
Our elections are extraordinarily important, without a doubt. But they occur every 2 years for congressional and every 4 and 6 years for presidential and senatorial. There's so much in between. There's so much in between that can and must happen. And part of it is also the American people, if we put our hope and expectations singularly in the election, and I don't say this to downgrade the importance of an election, extraordinarily important, but then we just spend 2 years sort of like, can't wait. Did it fill all my expectations? No, it didn't. Or yes, it did. And then we still have 2 more years until the next. I think what we have to do is very much have our eyes on that election, 26, 28, 30, 32. And what are the things that we can do short and long term to build that social fabric? Amy, I think you just said I'm preaching to the choir here. I think we need to start engaging. Who are the people who share our commitment to democracy, but may not share our political views? Can we come together to write a letter about something that we're concerned about? I think that's actually one of the strongest things that we can do if we're concerned about something. If we're concerned about you name the issue. If we're concerned about immigration, if we're concerned about foreign policy, can we come together and say, I don't agree with you on 50 things, but I'll agree with you on this? Let's come together. That's actually going to be one of the most powerful things to demonstrate to our political leaders that we will come together with other people, and it could potentially cost them when those elections come to push for change. That, I think, is really going to be the linchpin. Can we reach across the aisle to some people and just say, we're building a bigger tent on these things which are democracy related, not all, we don't have to agree on all the policies, but democracy related, because that's where we'll move the needle.
So I'm watching the time, and I think Tyler and Naomi had questions, and I had one more. So Nicole, if it's okay with you, can the three of us throw out our questions, and then you get the final word and you can address them any way you want?
Can I
okay?
ask one?
Oh, sure. Yeah. All right.
Okay,
So
no.
Carolyn, why don't you go first, and then
No,
we'll
it's okay. Thank you so much, Nicole. This has been marvelous. It's part of this team, and thank you, Amy, for arranging this and so forth. I noticed exactly like June did when you this sort of trifecta of OBAN going after the universities, the law firms, and the media. Oh my gosh. Couple questions, short things. One, I was delighted with your initial screen to see how much of Latin America um, was not anti-democratic. I was rather encouraged by that. I thought that was great. I wanted to know why Mexico was in this yellow sort of area. And then I wanted to know how serious a threat you think it is to the freedom of universities. Because having also taught at a college for a decade, I find that particularly terrifying, the amount of power that can be exerted into what happens on a day-to-day level in university classes and hiring.
Tyler, do you want to throw your question out there?
Oh, yeah, just quickly, I noted with interest that you label India as partially free, and I'm assuming that that's because of Narendra Modi's anti-Muslim bias. Is that correct? In other words, if you were just looking at the way India operates from the Hindu population aspect, my sense is they are very free, but I'm wondering what motivated you to call them only partially free.
Naomi?
A comment. We talk about national elections. Local is important. Our turnout on all levels is embarrassingly weak. We have to make our voices heard on every level routinely, because as we've seen abroad, the street ultimately rules. And we're just yawning. That's all.
Right. My last maybe half comment, half question is that I wonder if there's a foreign policy realignment in some ways that has taken hold, and it's been several years in coming. The left used to be very critical of U.S. foreign policy, critical of too much interventionism, too much, hypocrisy. Now you have this dynamic coming from a considerable wing of the Republican Party that also sees U.S. power very differently. And I wonder if kind of that criticism of the U.S.'s position in the world now just has a much larger base of support in the U.S., and if that matters. So you get the last word, Nicole. I'll let you answer or comment on any of those things.
All right. I'll try and do a speed round, and I really appreciate all of the comments. Really quickly, yes, Naomi, our local elections are extraordinarily important. 36 of our governors will be elected this November. it matters. Governors are in charge of our elections. They are in charge of our immigration in the state, on the state level. They are in charge of our healthcare. They are extraordinarily important, and the levels below that. So yes, everybody get out and vote and inform yourself about it. India is partly free certainly because of the persecution against the Muslim population, but Narendra Modi has also really gone after many other parts of our society, of the Indian society, and restricted freedoms in a lot of different ways. Latin America, yes, is very purple. Is very green and sorry, it's not purple. It's very green and has some yellow. Mexico is yellow a lot because of the security situation. That has been a significant problem, as we know that they've had a tremendous security problem. The cartels have a significant amount of influence there. Let me roll the threats to the university and the foreign policy alignment. I'm a glass half full person. I'm a glass 3/4 full person. We have an opportunity right now to reset a lot of stuff, foreign policy. Our universities, look, I believe, as a person who was also at a university for 10 years, we had some problems at universities. And most of the people I talked to, we had problems at our universities. I don't think that what we've seen in the last year is the way to solve them, but I do think there's ways to spur a conversation of, wow, what is the role of the university? The role of the university, we're creating citizens, right? How do we reinvigorate a lot of this conversation about democracy into our classroom and what it really means to cultivate the characteristics of a democratic citizen, not a big D, a little d democratic citizen? How are we creating pluralistic, vigorous debates on campus so people are exposed to different ideas at the most crucial years of their lives? That, to me, is an exciting part that all universities can wrestle with. Now, I do think that they need to really protect against a lot of the pressure that they're feeling right now, but also say, let's take an opportunity to look at what's going on campuses and ensure that what we are putting forward is the most pluralistic and robust education. I think the exact same thing on foreign policy. We've had some problems in our foreign policy. I agree, Amy, that we are seeing people talk about the horseshoe. We're seeing the left was very critical of the United States projecting power in the world and talking about democracy around the world. Some days I wake up and I'm like, wait, who is against what now? I'm getting confused. Now the right is having that. I'll say honestly, if you talk to most Americans, 70, 80%, they're going to say, of course we want to talk about our values. We love our values. They're not perfect. We're not perfect. We have a history that's very mixed, and they are the values that matter in the world. So of course we want to talk about them. We don't want to talk about them in a haughty, forceful way, but we don't want to be silent on them. And I think this is a time where we have an opportunity to talk about our foreign policy in a way which acknowledges that the United States will always be engaged around the world. We will be, and we carry with that a lot of opportunity. And if we carry with it the opportunity to project the values that have been so important to us at home and to do it in a way which is responsible and balanced and in partnership, we have a great opportunity. If we listen to the loudest voices who are just going to critique all of the challenges, we will retreat, and it will be to the detriment of the United States, and it will be a detriment to, I believe, to the rest of the world. So that's my hope and challenge to this next young generation I get to speak with, and all of you who have done a great job of pulling together a really great speaker series.
Thank you very much. This is marvelous. It's been wonderful.
You bet.
Nicole, thank you very much. And this is wonderful. I think we could have debated and continued and asked you for your advice and your comments all day long. And hopefully this will turn into practice and not just a lot of wishing. On our next program, it will be on March 11, which, unlike our usual Mondays, is a Wednesday. So this is a very special speaker. We wanted him, and we are accommodating his schedule. That is Ken Pollack, who's Vice President for Policy at the Middle East Institute. And he's one of the foremost experts on the Middle East. We can't say enough how pleased we are that he's joining us again. He will be speaking on Iran and the Middle East on the cusp of war. So I think many of the things that we've been talking about today, we will see being played out or is playing out in the Middle East as well. So please join us then for that very important talk. Nicole, thank you again so much. This was wonderful.
Thanks, Nicole. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Happy to chat anytime.
Thanks, Nicole. Appreciate it.
Thank you.